the competitiveness of globalization, that if you want to get ahead, you got to be up in the top right tail of the distribution of human performance. And if you want to be in the right tail, you have to work your ass off. You have to.
And there are no excuses. And you can't
keep your
change
nose
the
to
standards.
the grindstone. You have to actually exert a lot of effort. And the idea that if I'm going to have a good job, I've got to spend 12, 15 years, 60-hour weeks, with my nose to the grindstone might be very hard for a lot of people to accept. And the idea that if I don't do that, this guy over here who's coming from South Asia with an H1B visa is going to get the job and not me. That might be hard for people to take. This conflict that's broken out amongst the Trump team about the H1B visas and the Indian engineers and computer scientists and whatnot coming and taking jobs in tech. And Vivek Ramaswamy criticizing American culture, whatever he might mean by that, and extolling the virtues of South Asian culture, again, whatever that means, on the question of acquiring the skills necessary to succeed in the tech environment. And we need these people offshore coming in because we're not producing enough qualified people of our own. And the reason is a cultural reason. And so we need more visas. And Elon Musk saying, this is an issue that's important to me. We need more visas. We need competent people. I'm about getting stuff done. I don't have time for all this pussyfooting and tomfoolery that characteristic of the American thing. And I overheard Steve Bannon vituperating. I do not listen to Steve Bannon.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to something that I overheard. My wife was listening to something of somebody playing an outtake from Steve. Okay, I just want to be clear about that. But man, he was foaming at the mouth, Bannon, on the question of you have a dynamic sector of your economy and you're bringing people in offshore because you're saying they're more qualified when the real task is to make our own people fit for the et cetera, et cetera. And of course, he wasn't talking about Black people being squeezed out because of bias or profiteering or un-American disinterest in cultivating human talent here onshore. He was mainly talking about Americans. He didn't exclude Black people, Bannon, but it was the kind of lament that you might have associated with an anti-racist sentiment, but it was being expressed on behalf of the core mainstream heart of the American workforce. It's white people who are on the butt end of Vivek Ramaswamy's criticism when he says American culture sucks. Why do you celebrate the prom queen more than you do the calculus champion, et cetera? And it seemed to me that bespeaks a transracial merging of perception and sensibility that is class-driven, not race-driven. And that's not a bad thing in my view. Whatever I don't have a position on the H1B visa thing. I don't know enough about it to really have a well-calculated retort to Vivek and Elon. But it interests me, and I think it does bespeak a turning of the wheel. J.D. Vance could end up being president of the United States in a few years. Well, he's vice president, and Trump is only going to serve for 4 years. And the sentiments of hillbilly elegy could have a resonance in our popular culture. And that would not be a racial thing. That would be a transracial thing or whatever. What do you think?
Well, if somebody can figure out how, within the space of a generation, we could get enough white or Black or any other native-born Americans to fill those positions quickly, then I'd like to hear it. And in the meantime, we are an immigrant nation, as they say in Hamilton. Immigrants get things done. What it looks like is that we're seeing a certain cultural bent among, for example, the South Asians that Vivek is referring to. And frankly, it's always going to be that way, that some cultures do some things more and better than other cultures, partly for chance reasons, maybe partly because of specific aspects of that culture, and that's going to include Black culture. And, maybe it's gotten to the point that white culture, whatever that is one that is not especially prepared to fill jobs like that in very large numbers, in which case there are plenty of people who will come here and have children who will become, quote unquote, American within a single generation. And then they'll be their grandchildren. It's the same old thing. And there are always people sitting experiencing the new version of it who think of it as different from the way it was before. But it's just the same old story. But yeah, it's a very different story than you might have expected from the same sorts of people. He tried to get in touch with me, Ramaswamy, and I must admit.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, and I was polite, but I just, well, no. That's basically what I
when he
was.
was still a candidate, or
Would you
not?
have taken him up or let him take you up?
I don't think so. I mean, I was watching him from afar and was moderately impressed with his erudition
Oh,
and
he's brilliant.
the way he presented himself and whatnot. I think he's an interesting phenomenon. But no,
I just wondered, and I wondered if he had contacted you, but
no, he didn't.
yeah, that is my take on that particular issue. Although we're kind of in the middle of that news story, but yeah, that's what I've been.
All this talk about culture, it's so unscientific. Gives me the willies. I mean, for example, the Indian migration here to the United States is very selective. It's not a random draw on the subcontinent's population. It's people who come here to go to graduate school and stay on, or
Speaking English.
they're mostly Brahmins. They're speaking English practically as a native language, which makes them different from
most Indians don't speak English, but we would be surprised to know it based on the ones that we meet here. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I reckon that most well-educated Indians do speak English.
They do. Yeah.
So what we mean by culture is, and identifying that with a geographic population, a national population, when you've got such non-random selectivity going on in terms of what you're looking at, just gives me a little pause. Also, I think the competitiveness of globalization, that if you want to get ahead, you got to, in tech, you got to be up in the top right tail of the distribution of human performance. And if you want to be in the right tail, you have to work your ass off. You have to,
and there are no excuses. And you can't
keep your
change
nose
the
to the
standards.
grindstone. You have to actually exert a lot of effort. And the idea that if I'm going to have a good job, I've got to spend 12, 15 years, 60-hour weeks, with my nose to the grindstone, might be very hard for a lot of people to accept. And the idea that if I don't do that, this guy over here who's coming from South Asia with an H1B visa is going to get the job and not me. That might be hard for people to take.
Yeah, it is. And there's a black aspect to that too, in some stories that you see coming out of Silicon Valley, where you can see that our current running tacit idea that it's wrong to subject Black people to the same standards as everyone else. The idea being that racism means that you've got to give us a pass to a certain extent. Standards are going to be different for us. And, nobody says that outright. But it's kind of part of being an educated American to assume that. That doesn't work out there because, you can't, there's no Black way to do it. Either you're doing it right, either you're doing it excellently, or you're not. There's no way to bend it. It's not like doing history or art or something like that. And I can see that can make a person uncomfortable, a Black person uncomfortable, because we are trained to think that the standards are going to be different, and or that our job is to look around us and try to identify racism in the industry and be the whistleblower, and to show that recognition technology sometimes, does what you might call racist things. And some of those things aren't important. But there comes a point when if you are going to get that job that you're talking about, there's certain things you have to do that have nothing to do with your color, where nobody is going to give you a pass. There are no excuses, and there's no room for changing standards and arguing what the standards are. You just got to do it. That's going to be hard, especially, I think, for Black Americans, because of the way we're raised to think and have been since the 70s about standards and how much can reasonably expected of us given our history. I hope that Black Americans in Silicon Valley get past that quickly. I hope that after a generation, there are people who understand you've just got to do the work the way everybody else does, because there won't be any other way for there to be a foothold there. And in the meantime, it's going to be immigrants who just do the work.